When people talk about ranking discographies in hip hop, I feel like the most common name that always comes up is Kanye West because he has some of the most classic albums in hip hop history, and he's been on a crazy run now for the better part of 2 decades.
He's been active for such a long time at this point that, you could go through his whole discography and just, find classic after classic, especially when he had started back with the College Dropout and seeing the way that his discography had progressed over the years. So guys, listen, we're in another episode, we're doing Kanye West discography ranking, and the way this is going to work is that Lou and I are going to have our own list for this one because, Kanye West lists, are always a bit different for different fans. Like you can make the argument that, let's say, The Life of Pablo is your favorite album, or let's say 808s,
and it's always respectable.
Absolutely.
Any take,
So listen, guys, leave your lists in the comment sections. We always go through it. We love interacting with you guys. And Lou, what do you think is the best part about Kanye's discography?
I think it's the fact that you can choose almost any one of his albums as being his best, and people will respect your opinion because that's how great and how different each body of work is, and they're all bound to cater to different people's kind of preferences. So
Absolutely.
It's awesome. So you guys actually chose this, by the way, on Discord. On Patreon, and you guys voted for this, and it got a resounding amount of votes. So the Ranking Kanye West Discography got 14 votes, Top 10 Summer Rap Songs got 4 votes, and How Many Classic Albums Does Jay-Z Have got 1 vote. So you guys are going to head over to the link in the description if you want to vote on next week's YouTube episode. And by the way, we have a catalog out there that's really cool. We have our ranking of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, all the tracks on there, and we also have a classic review of Kids See Ghosts. So check it out if that might interest you. But without further ado, man, we're going to start from the beginning of Kanye's discog and make our way till the end and kind of have our own separate tier list. So
Absolutely.
To start off with his debut album, The College Dropout, this album shook the world when it dropped in 2004. And it was at a time where Kanye was known for his skills as a producer. And then he applied that to his own album by, kind of bringing in that chipmunk soul sound. So how do you feel and where does it rank for you?
Well, this is my number one Kanye album for a very big reason.
It's starting off like that.
Yeah, because, the thing is that a lot of people would put like MBDTF or they would put Late Reg there. I feel as if The College Dropout was, Kanye's rawest album. And then even going back to how that album was put together with obviously, revitalizing soul again in hip hop and utilizing soul samples, like it did so much for me. And
it's probably my number 2 album, by the way. If I had to put it on my list, I'd put it at number 2. And if you look at even a song like Family Business, Kanye is basically saying like, I had to figure a way to be creative with my rhymes without rapping about guns or knives. Like that's one of his bars. And it's because the whole thing of dropping out of college relates to him being him going against the norms of society and also against the norms of hip hop, because gangster rap was kind of dominating during that time, but he started to shift the tide.
A new aesthetic into hip hop. And I'm going to go through this track list because it's fucking iconic. If you go through the amount of tracks on here that absolutely slap and some of Kanye's best material, like example, We Don't Care, that's one of my favorite Kanye West songs. All Falls Down is an absolute classic. Spaceship is probably my favorite Kanye West song. It holds a close part to me because the thing is that when I was working, when I was younger, who hasn't, gotten pissed off or let's say irritated at a part-time job, especially like when you're working for someone you don't want to, or where you're doing shifts and long hours, like, it gets brutal at a certain point. And when I used to put that song in my headphones, it was just like, I used to get like this sort of inspiration. I used to get like, a sort of feeling that like, okay, like there's a greater purpose to this. So Spaceship's up there for me. Let's go to Jesus Walks and what that did. Apparently, Kanye West had showed this to so many people and everyone doubted him when he played that song because they thought it would have no commercial appeal because he was talking about obviously religious subject matter and other types of things that weren't necessarily prominent at the time. So him being able to break that barrier and also introduce religious aspects into his music was groundbreaking.
It was
for
awesome,
the time.
man. It was awesome. But let's move on now to Late Registration, which came out in 2005. And to me, the biggest thing that I take away from this album is that after, proving everybody wrong that he could actually be a breakout star in the hip hop game, he comes back again and outdoes himself. And yes, it still sounds, I would say, sort of similar production-wise to the College Dropout in the sense that there's a lot of soul samples and that sort of stuff.
It's more refined.
He elevated it by bringing in the 20-piece orchestra by hooking up with John Bryan, who, he knew from seeing him do the movie scores because he's actually a film composer. So So him tapping in with John Bryan really made this production feel more grand. And I mean, you got some of Kanye's best rapping on this album, and I feel like this is his most lyrically dense project, and it's because of the types of lyricists that you have on it, from Lupe Fiasco, to Common, to a bunch of other MCs who really stood out. I mean, you even have Nas on We Major. I mean, that was iconic because you have Nas and Jay-Z on the same album during kind of the midst of their beef still. And like Kanye brought them back together like that, and that was iconic.
And this track list is so consistent going through it, and I like why you said that it kind of followed that College Dropout sort of formula, where it obviously kept in the soul samples and there was different aspects to it. But that 20-piece orchestra did a great number for him. Because example, go to a song like "Touch the Sky," and the way that Kanye starts off that song. Don't tell me it's one of the most energizing Kanye tracks that you've ever gotten. And then obviously you get a legendary verse from Lupe Fiasco. Let's talk about Jamie Foxx's vocals on Gold Digger. Like, that was one of Kanye's biggest hits, and it was because it was done differently than the way hits were being done back then.
So where do you have it on your ranking?
This is actually at my number 3 position, and this is probably one of my favorite Kanye West albums for a good reason. It's because it's so complete, it's so concise, and it kind of feels like an upgraded version of the College Dropout. Just the College Dropout has more of an iconic sort of stance in my listening, and it was kind of the album that put me onto Kanye and that got me sort of used to his listening, because it's a very easy listen. So how about you? Where do you got this?
I probably have to give this at my number 4 spot, and I just love the fact that each track feels like its own symphony. And if you look at songs like Addiction, for example, Kanye brings in a variety of production elements and gives you a very psychedelic vibe, and it truly feels like you're going through a drug trip, which is kind of what he's talking about. Kind of how all the good things, everything that makes me feel good is bad for me. You know what I mean?
And then you got a song like
duality.
Diamonds from Sierra Leone, one of the most, iconic, again, Kanye tracks. Like, you're going to go through all of his discography and you're going to find so many gems within the track list that you may, forget over time, or you'd be like, fuck, I got to revisit this. Diamonds from Sierra Leone is super important to Kanye's discography because, he was kind of the one that, not spoke out against buying expensive jewelry and that sort of stuff, but gave you an insight on where your diamonds were coming from, and how there's like a parallel to like the industry with that, because the industry seems all glitz and glam, but people don't know the way it's ran and the way that all this music is being sourced. And obviously you get a crazy fucking Jay-Z verse on the bonus version of Diamonds from Sierra Leone. There's so much stuff to go here. Even you get like introspective tracks where he's talking about his mom with Hey Mama. Like, that's one of Kanye's best well put together tracks. So this track list is super consistent, man. I got to revisit this.
And this is a lot of people's favorite Kanye album, and I understand why. I mean, from start to bottom, he's just, he's giving his victory lap in a sense, but at the same time, he's showing you the extent of his artistry and, what he's able to do, production-wise and also as a rapper. So it's a great project, but let's move on now to 2007's Graduation, which is my favorite Kanye West album, and I think could be a strong argument for the best. And by the way, guys, this is kind of a mixture of what we think is the best and our own personal preferences. But with Graduation, to me, this was the biggest risk of Kanye's career, because after sticking to that hip-hop soul type of formula, he totally reinvents himself with Graduation and essentially graduates from the sound that he was using before and moves into a totally different artist, because after dropping Late Registration, he went on tour with bands like U2, and he saw the reception they were getting at these packed out stadiums, and he's like, I have to make stadium music. And that's exactly what he did. He brought in these electronic synths and so many other production elements that truly took his sound to different indie rock elements, different pop elements, and really bridge the gap between mainstream music that everybody could consume and hip hop fans.
If you go through this whole track list from 1 to 14, so much great content material. You probably have Kanye's best intro and Good Morning here. Champion is such a big vibe. I love this track because it gives you so much confidence, and Kanye's kind of telling you like you should be a champion in your own eyes, and you should be
it's about chasing your dreams
and be there. Like manifest your shit and go after what you want to go after.
And then you take Everything I Am, which is one of his most introspective tracks ever. You have the DJ Premier production, and not only that, but I mean, on that song, he's rapping about some really deep shit. He's rapping about how he's tired of seeing so many caskets in Chicago. I mean, but if you look at even the sampling, I mean, there's a variety of elements. He on like Champion, like you were just saying, he samples a reggae song and he has it on loop for the whole time. And the sample loops on here are incredible. And not only that, but I mean, I just feel like Graduation has aged the best for me out of any Kanye West album. And what's cool is that he went from having 20 song albums with his first two, and Graduation's only 13, but they're extended tracks. You have like 5 minute, length songs for the most part. And, he worked, of course, with Coldplay on this. And it was just some of my favorite Kanye tracks. And I hate that there's criticism around Barry Bonds and Drunken Hot Girls, because people always say, those two tracks aren't that good, so I can't place Graduation high. So what are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I love Barry Bonds. Like, Lil Wayne did his job on there, and especially for where they both were at in their career at that time, like, that was a legendary link up, and probably, one of my favorite songs off this whole project. If I'm not gonna, if I'm gonna be honest with you, like, I really don't understand like the bad reception with Barry Bonds. I could see how Drunken Hot Girls kind of has like a different.
I still fuck with it, man.
I listen. I like it as a Kanye fan.
It's the worst song on the album, but it's not a miss for me.
No, it's definitely not a miss. Like, I don't think that there's a single miss on this project. Not only that, but let's go back to I Wonder. That has to be one of the best produced Kanye West tracks I have ever heard. Like, the way that sample just plays in the background while Kanye, gets into a thing where, like, he's talking about, a female telling him, "Oh, you always think you're right," and then he's like, "Well, maybe I am, and maybe I do have that confidence." Like, that's what I got out of this fucking track
and that
list.
fucking bravado on Can't Tell Me Nothing, man.
It was different.
The flair that he came with was outstanding. And I mean, I just love the fact that, on songs like Flashing Lights and Homecoming, there's kind of that double meaning of him, talking about having to cater to the needs of a girlfriend, but at the same time, he's talking about having to cater to the needs to the public, and how, he has so much pressure to put on a crazy show or give out an amazing album because of the position he's in.
Absolutely. Then he talks out against Jay-Z on Big Brother, getting some introspection on that. And
but in the end, he shows love to him.
He does show love, but he kind of talks about, his experiences with Rockefeller and like the types of, pitfalls that he got into. And it was cool because Big Brother kind of feels similar to, let's say, Last Call on the Graduation, on the College Dropout, excuse me. And it's crazy how he plays both of those tracks at the end of the track list. So listen, fantastic project, definitely one of my most listened to Kanye albums. But let's get into 808s and Heartbreak. And this was really an aesthetic switch. Like, he completely reinvented himself again, and completely, I would say, changed the industry on this. So right before we get into this, where does this stand on your list?
This stands at number 5 on my list, which might be a bit high for most people, but I mean, how could you not, for the influence this album has, and just the subject matter is so heavy, and Kanye tackles it with a lot of pain and a lot of emotion in his writing, but it was beautifully executed. So before I go on, where is it in your ranking?
I have it at number 7.
Number 7, wow.
I'm 2 spots down, man. I'm not that far off from you. I'm right there.
And is it a classic album for you?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. No fucking doubt. Like, if you actually go through the amount of artists that have been inspired by this body of work, and the way that, he was able to bring autotune to a whole different level, because obviously T-Pain started that trend, and, Kanye was inspired by T-Pain. He brought it to a mainstream level. Not only that, but one of the first guys to ever get into melodic rapping. Like, apparently, like, Drake's like whole start of his career was just influenced by 808s and Heartbreak because of the subject matter that he was talking about. Just painful and deep sort of writing about him losing his mom, and then also, like, let's say, him feeling empty in this world. Like, there was, I can't remember which song it is, but he's also talking about stuff like, my boys are showing me pictures of their children while all I have are pictures of my houses and my cribs. Like, who's really winning at the end of the day? And I love that sort of subject matter from Kanye, because with the first 3 projects, you got such this, you got this big bravado and you got this arrogance from him, but now he's kind of taking it a notch down. So, talk to me about the production, because this is probably the most important, aspect of this whole project.
He used the Roland TR 808. I think that's how you pronounce it. Hold on.
I believe it is.
I believe it's the Roland TR 808 drum machine. And what he does is he kind of, manipulates it and distorts it to create this kind of electronic sound, which he ended up, I think, describing as Heartbreak. And the way that Kanye uses his auto-tune on this album makes him kind of almost sound robotic and less human. He kind of sounds emotionless, which is kind of the vibe that he's going for, which is genius, because, I mean, this was after the loss of his mother, Donda, and, I mean, obviously he also lost his fiancée, Alexis Pfeiffer, during this time, and again, a lot of duality from song to song, where he's talking about not only the loss of his mother, but the loss of that relationship with Alexis. And I mean, if you look at a song like Coldest Winter, it's fucking heartbreaking to listen to, because he's talking about how he'll never love another woman the same way that he loved his mother, and how, I mean, it's always gonna, like, the winters are always gonna feel especially cold now because he traveled from Atlanta to Chicago with his mother at the age of 3 in the wintertime. So a lot of people think that that song's about his relationship with Alexis, but it's actually about his mother. And if you look at Pinocchio's story, where he kind of blames himself for his own mother's death, it's really hard to listen to, and it's kind of it just feels real. I mean, the way that Kanye expressed grief just seemed very natural and very genuine on this album.
Let's talk about Say You Will. That's probably, one of the deepest intros that I've ever gotten from Kanye, again, talking about how he feels empty with his lifestyle. Like, he's doing all this crazy shit. He's putting up crazy numbers. He's making a lot of money. He has the women, he has the cars, he has the houses. But at the end of the day, he doesn't really have his family anymore, and like he feels like he's lost in this world of just pain and sort of a plastic feel to it. Like, that's what I like about it, is that he's not afraid to get vulnerable and say, like, listen, you guys are all fans of me and you guys are obviously buying my records, but my life feels empty right now. Like, I really have no more purpose in this world, and I got to find a new purpose to be able to expand on and to be able to grow from. So this is a beautiful track.
You know what I love about this album? It's the fact that when I go back and listen to it now, knowing that it's inspired emo rap, and which has become one of the biggest subgenres of hip hop today. I mean, Kanye really influenced Travis, Tyler the Creator, Drake, Lil Uzi Vert, Juice WRLD, XXXTentacion. I mean, some of the biggest and most impactful artists of this generation were inspired by this album, and it's because of that auto-tune. It's because of the very sentimental and, I would say, melodic rapping that Kanye dives into on this project. So, I mean, if you listen to a song like Love Lockdown and then you listen to Only One Interlude by Travis Scott, it's like, whoa, this is night and day, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those re-listens to 808s during this era are so fucking impactful, man.
Massively impactful. But let's get on to MBDTF, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. And this is probably Kanye's most loved album for a reason. It's because it's in the middle of his discography, and it probably has the most grand feeling to it. So why do you think the reception is so strong with Kanye fans on My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy?
Well, I think that, his attention in the public eye, reached kind of a halt after the VMA situation where he went into self-exile. So this comeback album meant everything to Kanye's career, and he executed and gave, his grandest album yet. And I mean, this is pretty much a rap opera because every vocal performance is so dramatic. I mean, take, Nicki Minaj's grunts and moans on a song like Monster. Take, Kanye's purposefully muffled voice on Gorgeous, and Cudi's very psychedelic and eerie hook on that song. I mean, every performance was top tier. We got some of the best features of 2010's decade from Rick Ross, from Jay-Z on So Appalled. And I mean, to me, this was Kanye showing us both the pros and cons of fame, and it was beautifully executed. So let me ask you, where does it fall for you?
This is my second favorite Kanye album.
This is my number 3.
Yeah, this is a top 3 Kanye album by no doubt. Like, there's just way too much consistency, and we just did a whole fucking track ranking on this, which, by the way, you guys could access in our Patreon link. It's in the bio right now. But what do you think is the best part about the track list? Because again, you go from number 1 to 9, there is not a single skip, and each song sort of feels on the same tier. So do you think that it's probably Kanye's best put together track list out of any other album?
I mean, 13 songs, some of his most iconic songs like All the Lights, which took 2 years to make, songs like Power, which took 5,000 hours to put together. I mean, yes, I feel like this could easily be made for the argument of it being his best album. I mean, like I said earlier, his verses on songs like Gorgeous and Runaway are some of his best verses ever. And if you think about how he made a moment by just pressing one piano key, that E major key, and then that causes a whole crowd to erupt, and he pretty much reinvented that key and gave it a whole new meaning. Like, there's just so many legendary moments, and I feel like Kanye made an album that showed people what it meant to make an artsy hip-hop album again, because we were kind of losing what that meant around 2010.
It was crazy because he brought in a whole different type of sound change with this project. Like, it's weird because it feels like a mix of, I don't know, like, it's so different and it's so out there, and it doesn't necessarily, like, I don't even know how to put this.
All you got to say is Mike Dean's guitar on Devil in a New Dress.
It's fucking mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing the way that he was able to put together this track list, and, just going to songs like Power, or let's say All the Lights, Monster, So Appalled, Devil in a New Dress, Runaway, Dark Fantasy. Like, there is endless, top tier Kanye content on this. And again, like going from 808s, I feel as if he was at his lowest on that album. And then MBDTF, it was kind of like he found that bravado again and he made it seem even grander. He put in, more production styles. He ended up changing his name again. He ended up doing so much different stuff on this project. And not only that, but going forward with it, he had that supporting cast to be able to support that track list and make it so diverse.
It was kind of a backhanded apology to Taylor Swift where he's masking this apology, but at the end of the day, he's being unforgiving in the sense that, like, this is who I am. Take me or fucking leave me. But I'm going to put out a body of work that's so good that you have to accept me back in the game, or else the game won't be, at the level that it could be. And that's exactly what he did. And he gave us one of his masterpieces and one of the best albums of the 2010s decade.
What's your top 3 on this track list? Let me ask
you.
My
top 3 is, I don't want to ruin it for the Patreon viewers, but I mean, I'll just say Devil in a New Dress is my number 1. What's your number 1?
Okay, I have Dark Fantasy at number 1.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, we'll leave it at that. We did the rest of our rankings on the Patreon video, but let's move on to Yeezus. So this is another massive album for Kanye West because, one, the production was super ahead of its time. I mean, it inspired a lot more artists, kind of like the way 808s did it, but just on a lesser scale. Not only that, but I feel as if this is also the album where Kanye takes his ego and sort of personifies it. Like it's its own persona. Like it's now Yeezus. Like it's the ultra sort of hyper version of Kanye and his ego. So, what type of feelings did you get throughout this album, and where does it rank for you?
This is, Kanye's most chaotic album, and I love it so much. For me, it ranks at my number 6 spot, and this was tough, to decide between Yeezus and 808s and Heartbreak, because with Yeezus, he totally reinvented himself once again by bringing in these industrial sounds, by bringing in this distorted bass, and also, bringing in the help of Daft Punk, who, helped with the electro and kind of house sounds that we hear throughout the track list, and that was kind of revolutionary. And then you had Rick Rubin, who came out and kind of, stripped the production back and made it more minimalistic. But from song to song, I mean, this album was Kanye, saying, okay, the fashion world wants to reject me. I'm going to come back and show, why you shouldn't reject me and why I'm at the top of my game and that I'm one of the biggest creatives that this generation will ever see. And this is really Kanye, like you said, on his ego shit. And I mean, take a song like I Am a God. I mean, where you hear his screams and just that very hectic energy of Kanye wanting to shout out to the world that I'm the fucking shit.
No, I know what I mean? And that's what's also cool about this track is that people kind of like misinterpret it, where it's kind of like people are thinking, okay, Kanye is calling himself like the one and only God, like the only guy that could be touched. But it's kind of different because I went back to this song yesterday night before we did this recording, and I kind of picked up on the way, like on what he meant by it. Kanye feels as if he's living through God's words and his God's message. So he is God in his own world, and he's kind of playing on his own level. Like, it's not him saying like, oh, I'm like Jesus and like I'm like Christ and like you guys all have to bow down to me. Like, I don't feel as if it's that sort of message. It comes off as that, but it's really, Kanye saying, I'm at my highest potential. You can't fuck with me. And the only one I'm really attached to is God himself. So I am God. And that's the kind of way like the writing goes through the whole song. But, let's talk about the biggest songs on this track list. You have Black Skinhead, Blood on the Leaves, and Bound 2. So
Bound 2 is one of my favorite outros. It's not my favorite Kanye outro.
You have 3 of Kanye's probably, I would say, I don't want to say best, put together songs. I say that on every single Kanye album I go through because there's some of his best writing on it. But what do you think, makes these 3 songs so iconic and kind of carried the rest of the track list? Because we only have 10 tracks on this, and automatically like 3 out of the 10 are, some of Kanye's biggest fan favorites.
Well, I mean, you didn't even mention my favorite song on this, which is probably New Slaves, and I love that song because he's talking about how people, he kind of takes that theme from All Falls Down and again brings it up when you slaves about how people are slaves to consumerism and how, I mean, he hates the fact that, these brands and corporations are really dictating people's actions. And I think that's why he had the Yeezus mask at his tours, because he's like, Kanye West, myself, I'm a brand and I don't want people to appreciate me for my celebrity and for my name and face recognition status. I want people to, respect me for my art and for my music. So the message behind that song is genius. And I just feel like Kanye is a vigilante on this album, and he's going against, corporate white America and really, showing his power as an artist and as a creative. And I loved it.
He shows his whole bravado on this. But let's get on to a very big fan favorite again. And this dropped back in 2016. And The Life of Pablo was such an interesting drop because he did it differently. It didn't, air on streaming services right away. The mixing and mastering was played with for, even a month after the album was out. There was only like a SoundCloud link that I was able to get to be able to listen to that album before it came out. And obviously it was a Tidal exclusive when Jay was trying to really push, different types of catalogs through Tidal. So why do you think The Life of Pablo is so loved, and where does it rank again? I'm going to ask you again.
Yeah, so this one I believe ranks for me at number 7. Yeah, ranks at number 7 for me. And I love this album because it's Kanye's messiest album. And also, he reinvented the way that an album is to be put out by, releasing it and then making changes to it as it goes on. And to Kanye, this album was, a changing, living, breathing expression of art. And I love that aspect because who's to say when an album's really done? And that's the way that Kanye treated this album. He treated it like, an application on your iPhone that, needs new updates. And I love that because to me, a creation artistically is almost never finished. And Kanye represented that. And I mean, throughout the whole track list, there's some of his most iconic moments. I mean, if you look at Famous and the statement he was making with that song, if you look at the beat drop on Father Stretch My Hands Part 1, just some of his best work ever.
Let's go through this whole track list because there's another big, change to this, and it's that there's 20 tracks. This was probably, Kanye's longest track list since, Late Registration, and the way that he was able to change this up and kind of go back to the way he was putting together albums, like really, really, really sounded refreshing in this. And he also introduced.
I don't think this album is put together the same way as first.
No, but like I'm talking about the 20. I'm talking
list.
about the 20 tracks on this. I'm also talking about the gospel aspect to it because take something like Ultralight Beam, like that's a great way to start off your album. And if you go through a lot of these Kanye track lists, the way he starts off, the albums are so fucking important because it's going to lead you through the rest of it. Father Stretch My Hand Part 1, think about how many different times you heard that song in a club or how iconic that was for 2016. Let's go to Feedback. Let's go to Freestyle 4 too. That loopy ending to Freestyle 4 after Designer finishes his verse. I used to get fucking scared of that when I used to get high. Like I used to smoke with my cousin, and then I used to get super tripped out. Yeah. I'm like, if production could do that to me, it's super well done, and then it has its place for me. Then I go into stuff like Real Friends or 30 Hours or even like St. Pablo.
No More Parties in LA with Kendrick, like, and them reuniting on a Madlib beat. I mean, it's some of his best stuff, and I love this album because. To me, this album was an identity crisis for Kanye West, and it was the beginning of that because we see it also on Ye, which we're going to talk about after this one. But Kanye's deciding, like, do I keep leading this life that I've loved leading where, I'm infatuated with women and I love my kind of rock star lifestyle? Or do I fully, tap into my father mode and my faith and my Christianity? That debate and that, kind of war, that inner battle that Kanye is going through really made this album, have longevity for me. And to me, it's the last classic album that we got. It's been 5 years and I could call it a classic because of the way that it was put together and the different themes. I mean, this represented 3 Pablos, Pablo Picasso, the biggest mover of art, Pablo Escobar, the biggest mover of product, and Paul the Apostle, who was the biggest mover of message, because Kanye meshes those 3 things in this album perfectly, and this is a fan favorite for a reason.
Absolutely. And let's talk about this being one of the biggest crossroads in Kanye's career. Once again, like, he had an option to go into, 2 different ways. Either he continues with his, braggadocious, bravado material that, he had seen on multiple projects like MBDTF or Yeezus, or he goes into more of like, an introspective Kanye talking about, let's say, the types of problems that he's encountering.
Being and I feel,
and not only that, but like it was a big transition within his discography because then you get Ye in 2018 and you kind of see the, the route that he chose and what he wanted to go on to. And Ye's very important for Kanye's discography for a multiple number of reasons. One of them being that it's kind of Kanye's most personal album in the way that he allows you to dive into his mind and the sort of environment that he puts you into. And it was sort of controversial because people were used to a certain style of Kanye, and then this had completely changed because he was introducing new sounds. It was a lot more minimalistic.
Where does it rank for you, man?
And it was a much shorter track list. This is actually, I believe, wait, I'm going to pull up my ranking again.
Number 8?
This is actually 8 for me.
It's number 8 for me as well, which, of course means that Jesus is King is going to fall at number 9 for us both. I think that's kind of a given because we're the last two. But yeah, like you were saying with Ye, in a way it is his most personal, maybe because it's kind of the deepest dive into Kanye's psyche. And, after, he had his issues, his mental health issues and kind of, had the bipolar disorder going on. So it was definitely a rough period in Kanye's life. But to me, I think the reason why it ranks so low is that even though it's different than any other Kanye album, I don't find that he really elevated his artistry on this one. I do like the way that he packaged it and the way that he made it, 7 tracks, that all killer, no filler type of philosophy. Loved that. But I didn't really, get Kanye elevating too much. But there are a series of highlights, and I love the fact that on songs like I Thought About Killing You, he plays with his vocal pitch and, literally raps about killing someone, but who he's really killing is his own ego because he wants to fully transition into a father. And on the outro of Violent Crimes, he makes that declaration that I'm this whole life of misogyny and excess luxury. That's all done for me. I'm now going to be a family man. So that was cool to see.
It was a beautiful transition into Kanye's discography, and that's why I think I appreciate it so much. As far as a listen goes, this is more in my bottom tier for a reason. I feel as if, there's obviously songs I revisit. Example, like I Thought About Killing You, Yikes, All Mine, No Mistakes. There's a lot of great tracks on here.
Ghost Town is great too.
But, that's why, the track list is fantastic. It's just compared to other Kanye material, I tend to go more towards, the first end of his discography, towards, let's say, the College Dropout all the way to MBDTF more than, this half. And this is where I feel as if Kanye kind of got stagnant with his projects. Not in the way that, they all sounded the same.
He didn't innovate?
No, not like that. I just feel as if, as you said, there was no sort of upgrade to his
music. That's what I'm saying. He didn't really innovate or do anything too new.
What I mean by innovate is kind of the way that he changed his production styles completely or whatever that is.
He didn't really do that, though.
Well, the change from the life of Pablo to Ye is quite drastic in my opinion. The way the types of sounds are put together, the content matter, it's a much different album.
It's a different album, but he didn't innovate. He didn't really create anything new for the hip hop genre like he did on previous albums, I would say. But this is his most minimalistic body of work, and I do appreciate that. I mean, from the album cover to the amount of tracks to just how focused the track list is in Kanye wanting to have his spirit and his soul be free. It was really well done. I mean, Ghost Town, look at 070 Shake's vocals, look at the production on that one. I mean, very psychedelic and very I would say true to Kanye's psyche. It really represented what he was going through, but I feel like he tapped into that in a much better way on Kids See Ghosts.
No, okay, definitely. The Kids See Ghosts is a much better project for me, but the sort of soundscape that he put you in was a very different feel than any other feel that I had with a Kanye album. The Life of Pablo was, as you said, very manic and very hectic, and this was a lot more deep, and it kind of gave me that same sort of vibe as I got on 808s and Heartbreak, just with different content matter and different production styles. It put me in a low place. It kind of made me feel as if I had to go into my own psyche and sort of look at the things that were bringing me down. So it definitely did a lot for me. It's just not something I revisit as much as other albums. But let's get on to Jesus is King. And I think that this is the consensus, I would say, last project in the discography ranking for a lot of Kanye fans, because it's so different than what he had put out, and we never saw Kanye dive into something besides his own sounds or whatever it is. And then getting into Jesus is King, it's a full gospel album. There's obviously rapping aspects to it, but what not what went wrong, but what sort of threw you off when listening to this track list, and why didn't it keep your, let's say your replay value over the last couple of years?
Honestly, I still enjoy the album. So, I mean, like you just said, it ranks at number 9 for both of us. I'm sure it does for a lot of Kanye West fans. But, I mean, to me, the issue with Jesus King is the fact that I do like how focused it is because, from the beginning all the way to Jesus is Lord, the outro, Kanye is on a journey to find God and to truly be able to, be a good follower to God at the end of the day. But that journey there to the last track kind of lacks personal depth. I do like the fact that he's praising God throughout the entire time, but this is the album where I heard, the least amount about Kanye and his own kind of introspection and his own reflection on where he's at in life. So for that reason, it's kind of low, but production wise, I mean, like every Kanye West album, there's no misses production wise.
No, the album was perfectly produced and engineered, and especially like, go to Follow God. That has to be, one of the best Kanye West samples that I've ever heard. Like, and I was talking to you about that. Like, imagine he would have took like that sort of Follow God sort of example in that product, and consistently placed that throughout the track list. And it's not to say that the rest of the track list is mediocre or that there's nothing else going on. It's just like, again, Kanye has so much material that you find yourself diving into other projects more than this one. So, songs like Closed on Sunday, that was a massive Kanye song because, he was sort of talking about how, on Sundays, I'm out of business. I'm taking time for myself and I'm kind of going through shit and I'm kind of understanding myself. And it was also a different sort of vibe with Kanye because he was also talking about how his life and how his lifestyle had changed and how it was going into a much different direction. And he didn't devote his energy to him anymore. He devoted it to God. And now he was dedicated towards preaching the word of God. So how do you feel about, the whole point of it not swearing and having no explicit content as well? Do you find that changed the feel of the album?
That was fine. That didn't bother me. I mean, Kanye, I think he's going to prove with Donda that he doesn't need to, to curse too much to put out a great album, even though that's been a part of, the majority of his projects. But I mean, look at 808s and Heartbreak. Not too much cursing on that project, and that was still, really well put together. But with Jesus is King, like I said earlier, the standouts are the production. I mean, look at On God, for example, where he taps in with Pierre Bourne, who gives him these spacey synths and kind of gives him that signature animated production style. That was amazing. Look at Kenny G's saxophone on Use This Gospel. I mean, so many standouts production-wise, and Kanye also dives more into singing here, and it feels very unfiltered. It feels very raw. It could, seem shaky at times, but it felt very true to Kanye, and for that reason, Jesus is King is not a bad album.
No, it's not a bad album. No. It's definitely not a bad album. And anyone that, calls it a miss, really doesn't understand Kanye's music. But it definitely is on the lower end of his discography. And it's because, Kanye's music, kind of captivated people at a certain point in a certain sort of mood. So when he completely changed that, I feel as if it kind of threw the fan base off. But as time will go on, I feel as if people would go to certain tracks and will start to love the project again.
So let me ask you this. Do you think that when it's all said and done, that Kanye will have the best discography of all time?
That is such a deep question. It depends how Donda performs, because now you're starting to see that the discography is
kind of declining a little bit.
Not a little bit, but it's just like it's not living up to, let's say, the projects that he had put prior to.
So just say it how it is, man. It's a little bit of a decline in the discography.
It's a bit of a decline. I don't like to shit on anyone, but the thing is like, A Tribe Called Quest. Let's talk about, let's say, the Lauryn Hill material. Let's talk about, Outkast.
I want to put Lauryn Hill in there because she has one album, but I mean Outkast for sure.
No, but like I'm talking about, let's say, the scores and the score and like the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Like those are some of the best projects ever put together. And
for sure,
she knew that she wanted to leave off her discography at that, and she didn't want to work on any other music. So that for me is iconic. Kendrick, Kendrick has not shown an inch of decline.
4 albums in though. Kanye's 10 in. We'll see how things go.
We'll see how it goes. But there's that competition that's automatically going in there. Like even Dr. Dre's discography is super consistent. But then again, like the reason why I think Kanye will end up still having that number one position is because of the amount of projects he's put out there. You can make the argument that
I don't care about that though. For me, it's always going to be quality over quantity, man.
I know,
and
but he has both though.
He does have both because
that's the thing.
I mean, I think we'll do a whole video at one point on how many classic albums we think Kanye has, but it's really a high number, and I would say more than 50% of his albums are classic albums, and that is such a fucking feat to accomplish. So Kanye West has truly blessed us over the years, man, with one of the best catalogs in modern music history, and every album just really has deeper messaging than you think, and soundscape wise, just really revolutionary shit.
Absolutely. And that's why Kanye West is one of my favorite artists for that reason. So
Same
consistent
here.
with his material, and you'll never, ever get a half-assed product from Kanye West. People could say that they have certain gripes with his music, or, he doesn't write his bars, or he doesn't do this. Shut the fuck up. Like when you go through a Kanye album, it's going to be quality nonetheless. And it's some of the best producing you're probably going to get, out of the industry at this point, because there's not many producers that are active right now that could produce like Kanye West. So on that note, guys, thank you for going through all of the video with us. Again, leave your ranking in the comment sections, because for Kanye West fans, this is probably the biggest conversation, is like, where do you put this album? Where do you put that album? It's always a fun conversation
also,
to go through.
Expect some more videos from the Donda rollout too, because that album is going to be coming out any weekend now, and it's going to be huge because the anticipation remains at an all-time high as Kanye is living in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium to finish it up. So exciting, and we'll keep you guys going through all the updates with that, and of course our album review when that drops. So thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you for watching the video. It's always a pleasure doing content for you guys. Listen, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, because we're doing album reviews, and we actually have our series called Everything We Know, where we take you guys through the whole album rollout of the hottest releases of the year. Not only that, guys, but our Patreon plan is now live. You guys can access that in the bio. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.